I sat in the DMV waiting room, my neck still throbbing from his punch this morning. My mother's text burned on my phone screen. Don't make a scene. Don't shame our family. But she didn't know I'd slipped a note between the registration papers, and she definitely didn't know the clerk was about to read it out loud. Right in front of him, they thought I'd stay silent like I had for 15 years. This time, I'd written everything down. This time, I'd let the system do what I couldn't. My name is Leah Whitman, and I'm 28 years old. This morning, my mother stood in my apartment doorway, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at the purple bruise blooming across my neck like a toxic flower. "What is that on your face?" she demanded, her voice sharp with accusation rather than concern. I touched the tender skin reflexively, feeling the heat radiating from where Mitchell's fist had connected with my jaw just hours earlier. The bruise had spread upward, painting my neck in shades of violet and yellow. But my mother wasn't asking what happened. She was asking why I'd let it show. "It's nothing," I said, turning away from her scrutinizing gaze. My hands shook as I poured coffee into a chipped mug, the only one left after Mitchell's last visit to my place. "Nothing." She stepped into my kitchen uninvited, her heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown. "You have to be at the DMV in an hour. People will see. What will they think?" "People, always people, never me." "Maybe they'll think the truth," I said quietly, but she was already rifling through her purse, producing a concealer stick like a magician pulling out a wand. "Don't be dramatic. Leah, here, cover it up. Mitchell is waiting in the car. You know how he gets when we're late." Yes, I knew exactly how he got. I'd known for 15 years. Ever since she'd brought him home and announced he was going to be my new daddy. I was 13 then, still naive enough to believe that mothers protected their daughters. "I don't want to go," I said, but the words came out weak, practiced. We'd had this dance before. "It's just paperwork, sweetheart," she said, her voice switching to that false sweetness she used when she needed something. "The car needs to be in his name for the loan. You're doing this for the family." The family, that sacred unit that demanded my silence, my compliance, my signature on whatever document Mitchell needed to further his schemes. This time it was my grandmother's car, a 1967 Mustang she'd left me when she died. The only thing of value I owned, and the only thing that connected me to someone who'd actually loved me. "It's my car," I said, gripping the counter edge until my knuckles went white. "Grandma left it to me." My mother's face hardened, the maternal mask slipping to reveal the woman who'd chosen her husband over her daughter every single time. "Your grandmother is dead. Leah, Mitchell is alive, and he needs this for the business. Stop being selfish." Selfish, that was her favorite word for me. I was selfish when I locked my bedroom door at night, selfish when I moved out at 18, selfish when I refused to come to Sunday dinners where Mitchell would drink too much and his hands would accidentally find their way to places they shouldn't. "The bruise," I said, meeting her eyes. "Don't you want to know how I got it?" She looked away, busying herself with closing her purse. "I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. You know how you can be." How I could be clumsy, dramatic, overreacting, making mountains out of molehills. All the words she'd used over the years to explain away the bruises, the fear, the nights I'd called her crying from locked bathroom doors. "He hit me," I said clearly, each word deliberate. "This morning, when I said I wouldn't sign the papers." "Lower your voice," she hissed, glancing toward the window as if Mitchell might hear from the car 3 floors down. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. He came here at 6 in the morning, pushed his way in, and when I said no, he—" "Stop." She held up a hand, her wedding ring catching the light. The ring Mitchell had bought with my college fund money. "Just stop. We are going to the DMV. You are going to sign those papers, and we are going to move past this like a family." "Like a family," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. "Is that what we are?" She softened then, reaching out to touch my face. I flinched, and hurt flashed in her eyes. For a moment, I saw the mother she used to be, before Mitchell, before the choices that had carved a canyon between us. "Leah, please," she said. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He's not a bad man. He provides for us. He loves us. He loves control, I corrected. And you love letting him have it. The slap came fast, her palm connecting with the unbruised side of my face. We stood there, both shocked by the contact. She'd never hit me before. That had always been Mitchell's department. Get dressed, she said coldly. Wear something with a high collar. We leave in 20 minutes. She walked out, leaving me alone with the echo of her heels and the sting on my cheek. I touched the new red mark, wondering if she'd offer me concealer for that too. 20 minutes. That's all I had to decide if today would be different. If today I'd finally fight back. I walked to my bedroom, past the hole in the wall Mitchell had put there last Christmas, past the locked drawer where I kept the documentation I'd been collecting for years, police reports that went nowhere, medical records from emergency room visits, photos of bruises that looked like abstract art in purple and yellow and green. On my desk sat a manila folder, the DMV paperwork Mitchell had left during his morning visit. Right next to it, my laptop was open to an email I'd been drafting for weeks. The subject line read, Formal complaint of ongoing domestic violence, Mitchell Harmon. I had 3 recipients saved in the draft: the Department of Motor Vehicles Internal Investigation Unit, the State Human Resources Department where Mitchell worked as an administrative consultant, and a nonprofit organization that specialized in helping abuse victims navigate the legal system. All I had to do was hit send. But I knew what would happen. My mother would deny everything. Mitchell would call me a troubled young woman with a history of mental health issues, anxiety and depression he'd caused, but would twist to his advantage, and I'd lose the only family I had left, broken as it was. I picked up the folder, feeling its weight. Inside was the transfer of ownership form for my grandmother's Mustang, the car Mitchell wanted to use as collateral for some shady business loan, the last piece of my grandmother he could steal from me. 20 minutes had become 15, then 10. I opened my closet and reached for a turtleneck, then stopped. No, not today. Instead, I chose a V-neck shirt that would show every purple mark on my throat. I printed out the email, all 5 pages of detailed incidents with dates and evidence references, and I slipped it behind the transfer form in the folder. They wanted me to go to the DMV fine, but I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I grabbed my phone, seeing another text from my mother, "Don't shame us." Shame, as if the shame was mine to carry, as if I was the one who should be embarrassed by what happened in our family. I typed back a simple response, "On my way." Then I added the printed complaint to the folder, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Mitchell was waiting in the car, probably already planning how he'd spend the loan money. My mother was there too, reapplying lipstick in the mirror, pretending everything was perfect. But tucked between those DMV forms was the truth, and once that clerk started processing the paperwork, once they saw what I'd hidden there, the system would do what my mother never could: protect me. The car ride to the DMV was suffocating. Mitchell drove his black BMW like he owned the road, cutting off other drivers and muttering curses under his breath. My mother sat in the passenger seat, reapplying her lipstick for the 3rd time, using the visor mirror to avoid looking back at me. I pressed myself against the leather seat, the folder clutched in my lap like a shield. "Stop fidgeting," Mitchell barked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. His face was flushed, the broken capillaries on his nose more visible in the morning light. "You're making me nervous." Everything made Mitchell nervous: my presence, my absence, the way I breathed, the way I didn't. "I'm not fidgeting," I said quietly, but my hands tightened on the folder. "Don't talk back," my mother said automatically, still focused on her reflection. "Mitchell's doing you a favor, handling all this paperwork." A favor, like stealing my inheritance was some kind of gift I should be grateful for. My phone vibrated, another text from my mother, despite her sitting 2 feet away. "Remember what we discussed? No scenes, just sign." I didn't respond. Instead, I looked out the window at the passing storefronts, the normal people living their normal lives, unaware of the war being fought in this luxury sedan. The loan's already approved, Mitchell said, his voice taking on that fake casual tone he used when he was lying. Just need the collateral paperwork finalized. Should have the money by Friday. What's the loan for? I asked, knowing it would anger him but unable to stop myself. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Business expenses. Nothing you need to worry about. It's my car. I think I have a right to know. You have a right to shut your mouth, he snapped, then caught himself, forcing a laugh. Sorry, princess. Rough morning. You know how stressed I've been with work. I knew his version of stress. It smelled like whiskey and ended with bruises. My mother finally turned around, her smile bright and false. It's for the restaurant franchise. Remember Mitchell's going to be a business owner. Isn't that exciting? The restaurant franchise. Last year it was real estate. The year before, cryptocurrency. Mitchell burned through schemes like cigarettes, always using other people's money, always leaving destruction in his wake. And you need a classic car for a restaurant, I pressed. Collateral, Mitchell said through gritted teeth. Banks like tangible assets. That car's worth $60,000. Easy. $60,000. That's what my grandmother's love was worth to him. Just numbers on a loan application. We pulled into the DMV parking lot at 8:47. The building looked like every other government office. Beige and institutional, fluorescent lights already harsh through the windows. But today it felt different. Today it was my battlefield. Listen, Mitchell said, turning off the engine but not moving to get out. We go in. We handle this quickly. And we leave. No conversations with the staff beyond what's necessary. Understood. Why? I asked, afraid of something. His face darkened. In the confined space of the car, I could smell his cologne mixed with the coffee on his breath. I'm afraid of you embarrassing your mother. Again. Mitchell, my mother said softly, placing a hand on his arm. The gesture was meant to calm him, but I saw how she flinched when he shrugged it off. No, Diana. She needs to understand. This family has given her everything, a roof over her head. I pay my own rent, I interrupted. An education. That I'm still paying off because you stole my college fund. And chance after chance to be part of something. He was shouting now, spit flying from his mouth. But you're too selfish to see it. Just like your grandmother. Stubborn, ungrateful, worthless. The word hung in the air like a blade. Worthless. He'd called me that before, usually with his hands around my throat, but never in front of my mother. Never this openly. I waited for her to defend me, to say something, anything. Instead, she opened her compact and checked her makeup again. Are we done? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my chest. Because the DMV opens in 10 minutes. Mitchell laughed, an ugly sound. Yeah, we're done. Get out. We walked across the parking lot in formation. Mitchell in front, my mother beside him, me trailing behind like an afterthought. The folder felt heavy in my hands, weighted with more than just paper. Inside was my truth, waiting to be discovered. The DMV was already crowded, the morning rush of people trying to handle their business before work. The smell of industrial coffee and floor cleaner hit me as we entered. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, making everyone look sickly and washed out. Number, Mitchell demanded, and I pulled a ticket from the dispenser. G47. We found seats in the waiting area, Mitchell positioning himself between me and the exit like I might run. My mother sat on his other side, scrolling through her phone, probably looking at Pinterest boards for the restaurant that would never happen. They're on G23, Mitchell said, checking the digital display. 24 numbers. Should be about an hour. An hour. 60 minutes before everything changed. My phone rang, my mother's name on the screen, even though she was sitting 5 feet away. Answer it, Mitchell ordered. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Answer the phone. I stood up, needing distance from him. I'm going to the bathroom. Sit down, he said, but I was already walking away. The bathroom was a typical government building disaster. Flickering lights, broken stall doors, and a mirror that reflected back a woman I barely recognized. The bruise on my neck had darkened, spreading like spilled ink. My mother's slap had left a faint mark on my other cheek. I looked like a canvas of violence. My phone buzzed with texts. "Come back to your seat. You're embarrassing us. Mitchell is getting angry. Please, Leah. For me? Always for her. Never for me." I typed back, "I'll be out in a minute." But first, I opened the folder and checked the papers one more time. The transfer form was on top. Mitchell's information already filled in with his blocky handwriting. Behind it, my typed complaint. 5 pages detailing 15 years of abuse. Names, dates, incidents, hospital records referenced, police report numbers listed, everything he'd done, everything she'd allowed, compressed into Times New Roman font. I'd added a note to the top, written on DMV letterhead I'd printed at home. "To whom it may concern, the man accompanying me is Mitchell Harmon, who has subjected me to physical and emotional abuse since I was 13. I am being coerced to sign this document under threat of violence. Please follow DMV Protocol 7.3.2 regarding suspected domestic violence situations. Contact information for verification is included in the attached documentation. Leah Whitman." Protocol 7.3.2. I'd looked it up. DMV employees were mandated reporters. If they suspected coercion or abuse, they had procedures to follow, security to call, safe rooms to offer, a system designed to protect people like me. All I had to do was make sure they found it. I returned to the waiting area. Mitchell's face was red, his jaw clenched. My mother grabbed my hand as I sat down. "Don't ruin this," she whispered. "Please, we need this." "We?" I asked. "Or he?" She squeezed harder, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "There is no he or I. There's only us. Family." "G47, the electronic voice announced. "Window 4. Mitchell stood immediately, gesturing for me to follow. My mother stayed seated, eyes glued to her phone like a lifeline. "Come on, Diana," Mitchell said. "I'll wait here," she replied, not looking up. "You two can handle it." For a moment, something passed between them, a look I couldn't decipher. Then Mitchell shrugged and headed for the window, expecting me to follow. I did, the folder tight in my hands. The clerk at window 4 was a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read Curtis. "How can I help you today?" Curtis asked, fingers already poised over his keyboard. "Car title transfer," Mitchell said. "All business. Should be straightforward." Should be. But nothing with Mitchell was ever straightforward. I stepped forward and placed the folder on the counter. My heart hammering so hard, I was sure they could hear it. "All the paperwork is in here," I said, meeting Curtis's eyes. "Everything you need. And so much more. The scratched-out name on my birth certificate had haunted me for years. I'd found it when I was 16, digging through my mother's files looking for my Social Security card for my first job application. There, on the line marked Father, someone had written a name in blue ink, then violently scratched it out with black pen until the paper was nearly torn. Who was he? I'd asked my mother that night, holding the certificate with shaking hands. She'd snatched it away, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. "Nobody. A mistake. Mitchell is your father now." But Mitchell wasn't my father. He was the man who'd moved into our house when I was 13, bringing his temper and his rules in his hands that left marks. He was the man who'd systematically erased every trace of my life before him. Photos disappeared. Mementos vanished. Even stories about my early childhood became forbidden topics. Standing at window 4 now, watching Curtis begin to process the paperwork, I thought about all the things Mitchell had stolen from me over the years. Not just objects or money, but pieces of my identity, fragments of my history. "This is a nice car," Curtis said, looking at the vehicle information. 1967 Mustang. Those are valuable?" "It was my grandmother's," I said, before Mitchell could speak. "She restored it herself. Took her 10 years. Mitchell's hand landed on my shoulder, squeezing just hard enough to warn, "Let's not bore the man with stories." But Curtis seemed interested. A woman restoring a classic car in the 50s and 60s. That's impressive. Must have been quite a lady. She was, I said, shrugging off Mitchell's grip. She owned an auto shop, first woman in the state to get her master mechanic certification. I'd never told Mitchell that. He thought the car was just some old vehicle she'd bought, not understanding its history, its significance. Grandma had built that car with her own hands, defying everyone who said a woman couldn't understand engines. She'd left it to me because she saw that same defiance in me, buried under years of being told to stay quiet, be good, don't make waves. Just process the transfer, Mitchell said curtly. We're in a hurry. Curtis nodded. Flipping through the papers, I watched his face, waiting for him to find the note, the complaint hidden beneath the routine forms. My pulse pounded in my throat, right where the bruises bloomed purple and yellow. You know, I said suddenly, I just remembered something. Mitchell stiffened beside me. Leah, when I was 5, before you came along, my mom used to tell me about my real father. She said he was an artist, painted murals. Stop talking, Mitchell commanded. But I couldn't. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. She kept one of his paintings in the attic, a sunset over water, all oranges and purples. You burned it, didn't you? That weekend you cleaned out the attic and had that big bonfire in the backyard. You're confused, Mitchell said, his voice dangerously low. You're remembering wrong. I remember the smell, I continued, looking directly at Curtis now. Oil paint doesn't burn like regular trash. It smells toxic, chemical. Curtis had stopped typing, his hands still over the keyboard. Something in my voice, maybe, or the way Mitchell was standing too close, breathing too hard. Is everything all right here? Curtis asked carefully. Everything's fine, Mitchell answered quickly. My stepdaughter has an overactive imagination. Stepdaughter. At least he admitted that much. What else did you burn that day? I asked, turning to face Mitchell fully. The photo album's mom's wedding dress from her first marriage, every piece of evidence that we had a life before you. You need to stop, Mitchell said. His face was turning that dangerous shade of red, the one that usually preceded violence. Or what? I challenged. You'll hit me again. In front of witnesses this time. Curtis cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, if there's a dispute about this transfer. There's no dispute, Mitchell interrupted. She's going to sign the papers like we agreed. Like you demanded, I corrected. This morning, when you showed up at my apartment and... Mitchell's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, not hard enough to leave marks that would show immediately, but firm enough to hurt. He'd perfected that grip over the years. Excuse us for one moment, he said to Curtis, already pulling me away from the window. But I planted my feet, using my free hand to grip the counter. No, I'm not going anywhere with you. Sir, please let go of the young woman, Curtis said, his voice carrying new authority. Mitchell released me, holding up both hands in a gesture of innocence. Just a family disagreement. You know how it is. I need to see some additional identification, Curtis said, looking between us. From both parties, standard procedure for transfers of valuable assets. It wasn't standard. I'd transferred a car title before, but Curtis was buying us time, or maybe buying himself time to assess the situation. Mitchell pulled out his wallet, slapping his driver's license on the counter with more force than necessary. I did the same, my hands trembling slightly. As Curtis examined the IDs, I saw his eyes flick to my neck, to the bruises I'd refused to hide. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Mr. Harmon, he said, I need to verify some information in our system. This will take a few minutes. Please have a seat in Area 4. He pointed to a section of chairs near the security office. We'll wait here, Mitchell said. I'm afraid that's not possible. DMV policy, Area 4, please. Mitchell looked like he wanted to argue, but a uniformed security guard had materialized nearby, casually adjusting his radio. With a grunt of frustration, Mitchell stalked off to the designated area. Curtis waited until he was out of earshot, then leaned forward slightly. Miss Whitman, are you here of your own free will? The question hung in the air between us, Such a simple thing to ask. Such a complicated thing to answer. Was I here of my own free will? I'd driven here in Mitchell's car. Walked in on my own 2 feet. But the bruises on my neck, the years of conditioning, the mother who chose him over me again and again, how much free will did I really have? "There's a note," I said quietly, "in the folder, behind the transfer form." Curtis's fingers found the papers immediately. I watched his eyes move across my typed words, saw his expression harden as he read. He glanced at Mitchell, then back at me. "This is a very serious accusation," he said softly. "It's not an accusation," I replied. "It's a report. 15 years of reports. Actually, check the case numbers. They're all real." He continued reading, and I found myself thinking about names again. How Mitchell had tried to get me to take his last name when he married my mother. How I'd fought to keep Whitman, my grandmother's name, the one thing he couldn't scratch out or burn away. "Your mother," Curtis said carefully, "is she—" "Sitting in the waiting area, pretending none of this is happening," I finished. "She's very good at that." I turned to look at her, still in the same spot, still scrolling through her phone. Did she know what I was doing? Did she suspect? Or was she so deep in denial that she truly believed we were just here for a simple title transfer? "Miss Whitman," Curtis said, pulling my attention back, "I need to follow certain procedures now. You understand?" I nodded. "That's why I came here. You have procedures, protocols, systems that can't be scratched out or burned away. Are you in immediate danger?" I almost laughed. I'd been in immediate danger for 15 years, but I understood what he meant. "He won't do anything here," I said. "Too many witnesses. He's careful about that." Curtis made a note, then looked at me with those kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You're very brave, Miss Whitman." "No," I said. "I'm just tired of being erased." He nodded, understanding in a way that made my throat tight with unshed tears. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "This is Curtis at window 4. I need a protocol 7.3.2 response. Yes, immediate." And just like that, the system kicked into motion, the beautiful, bureaucratic system that Mitchell couldn't charm or bully or beat into submission. As Curtis made his calls and filled out his forms, I thought about my grandmother's car sitting in the parking lot. She'd built it piece by piece, refusing to let anyone tell her what she couldn't do. Maybe I was more like her than I'd realized. Mitchell must have sensed something was wrong. He stood up from Area 4, started walking back toward us. The security guard intercepted him, politely but firmly directing him back to his seat. "What's taking so long?" Mitchell called out, his voice carrying across the DMV. "Just a few more minutes, sir," Curtis replied calmly. Then, to me, "You don't have to sign anything you don't want to sign." "I know," I said, and for the first time in 15 years, I really did. "Why don't you ever remember what we've done for you?" Mitchell's words echoed in my head as I watched him pace in Area 4 like a caged animal. That question had followed me through years of family dinners, tense car rides, and confrontations that always ended with me apologizing for crimes I hadn't committed. What they'd done for me, it was a ledger written in disappearing ink, where deposits were magnified and withdrawals were erased. They remembered every meal, every roof over my head, every dollar spent, but somehow forgot every bruise, every insult, every piece of myself I'd sacrificed to keep their peace. Curtis was still on the phone, speaking in low, official tones. I could see my mother in the waiting area, finally looking up from her phone. Her eyes found mine across the crowded DMV, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker across her perfectly made-up face. She started to stand, but Mitchell barked something at her from Area 4, and she sank back down, even from here, separated by security and protocol. He still controlled her movements, just like he'd controlled mine for so long. "Miss Whitman," Curtis said, hanging up the phone. "Someone from our administrative team needs to speak with you. Would you mind stepping into that office?" He pointed to a door marked Authorized Personnel Only. "What about the title transfer?" I asked, though we both knew that was no longer why I was here. "That's on hold pending review," he said carefully. Then, louder. For Mitchell's benefit. Just routine verification for high-value vehicles. Mitchell wasn't buying it. I could see him arguing with the security guard, his gestures becoming more animated. My mother had given up pretending to look at her phone and was watching the drama unfold with the expression of someone witnessing a car crash in slow motion. I followed a woman in a DMV supervisor badge into the small office. She introduced herself as Patricia and offered me a bottle of water, which I accepted gratefully. My throat felt raw, whether from talking or from years of silence finally breaking. "Mr. Curtis shared your documentation with me," Patricia said, sitting across from me at a small table. "This is quite comprehensive." "I've been collecting evidence since I was 19, I admitted. "I didn't know what else to do with it." "You did exactly the right thing bringing it here," she assured me. "We take these situations very seriously. Now, I need to ask you some questions. Are you comfortable with that?" I nodded, even though comfortable was the last thing I felt. "The man with you, Mitchell Harmon, he's your stepfather." "Legally, yes. He married my mother when I was 13. The words tasted bitter. "But he's never been a father to me. Fathers don't—" I gestured to my neck. Patricia made a note. "And the vehicle in question belonged to your grandmother. She left it to me in her will. I have all the documentation. Mitchell wants to use it as collateral for a loan, but I think he's planning to sell it. He's done this before with other things." Other things. The memories flooded back, a catalog of losses. My grandmother's jewelry. He said it was lost in a movie. My college fund, supposedly invested in a business that failed. A savings bond from my birth father's parents, cashed out for a family emergency that never existed. He takes everything that isn't his and makes it disappear. "And your mother?" I had to think about how to answer that. How do you explain a woman who chose blindness, who perfected the art of looking the other way? "She enables him," I said finally. "I used to think she was a victim too. And maybe she is. But she made her choice. Every time I asked for help, she chose him." Patricia leaned forward slightly. "Can you tell me about this morning, what prompted you to include this documentation with your DMV paperwork?" I almost laughed at the formal phrasing. What prompted me, as if it were a simple decision, like choosing what to wear. "He came to my apartment at 6 a.m., I began, the words flowing easier now. "He has a key. My mother gave it to him, said it was for emergencies. He let himself in while I was making coffee, said we needed to go to the DMV today, no discussion. And when you refused—" "I didn't refuse immediately. I asked why it had to be today. Why the rush? That's when he grabbed me, said I was ungrateful, selfish, just like—" I stopped, swallowing hard. Just like my grandmother. It's his favorite insult. Comparing me to the one person who ever stood up to him." Patricia's pen moved steadily across her notepad. Outside the office, I could hear raised voices, Mitchell's, demanding to know what was taking so long. My mother's, higher-pitched, trying to calm him. "He hit me when I said I needed time to think about it," I continued. "Not with a closed fist. He's too smart for that. Open palm to the throat. Makes it hard to scream. Then when I was gasping, trying to breathe, he very calmly explained that we were going to the DMV at 8:30, and I was going to sign whatever he put in front of me." "Did you call the police?" "What would be the point?" The question came out more bitter than I intended. "I've called them before. Mitchell tells them I'm unstable, have a history of making false accusations. My mother backs him up. They leave, and things get worse." "But you kept documenting—" "It was the only thing I could control," I said. "Every incident, every threat, every bruise, I took pictures, kept medical records, wrote everything down. I thought maybe someday—" I trailed off. "Someday someone would believe you. Someday I'd believe myself," I corrected. "That it was real, that I wasn't making it up or exaggerating or being dramatic like they always said." Patricia reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "It's real, Miss Whitman. What's been done to you is real, and it's not your fault." Those words, so simple, so obvious, hit me like a physical blow. I'd waited 15 years to hear them from my mother, To have a stranger say them in a government office while fluorescent lights hummed overhead seemed both pathetic and profound. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, we follow protocol, the documentation you've provided, combined with the visible injuries and the circumstances of today's visit, triggers several mandatory reporting requirements. Law enforcement will be involved." "He'll deny everything." "That's his right, but the evidence speaks for itself. And Miss Whitman, the fact that he brought you here, to a government building with security cameras and multiple witnesses, shows a level of arrogance that often works against people like him." People like him. It was comforting to know there was a category, that Mitchell wasn't some unique evil but a type, predictable and manageable if you knew the patterns. A knock on the door interrupted us. Curtis peered in. "The police are here," he said quietly, "and Mr. Harmon is becoming increasingly agitated." I thought about all the times Mitchell had lost his temper in private, careful to keep his violence hidden behind closed doors. Now he was exposing himself, his mask slipping in a building full of witnesses and cameras. "Your mother is asking to speak with you," Curtis added. Of course she was. Even now, she'd be thinking about damage control, about smoothing things over, about keeping the family together, the family that had broken me piece by piece. "Tell her no," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Curtis nodded and disappeared. Patricia stood up, gathering her notes. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. I thought about my grandmother's car in the parking lot, about the scratched-out name on my birth certificate, about 15 years of being told I was worthless, ungrateful, dramatic. I thought about my mother, choosing blindness over her daughter, and Mitchell, so confident in his control that he'd brought me to the one place where his power meant nothing. "I've been ready for years," I said. "I just didn't know it." We walked out of the office together, into a DMV that had transformed into a crime scene. 2 uniformed officers stood by Area 4 where Mitchell sat rigid with rage. My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands, mascara smudging despite her waterproof claims. She saw me and started forward, but an officer gently blocked her path. Our eyes met across the institutional space, and I saw her mouth the words I'd heard 1,000 times, "Don't do this." But I was already doing it, had done it the moment I slipped that documentation into the folder. The system was in motion now, grinding forward with bureaucratic inevitability. "Leah!" Mitchell's voice boomed across the DMV. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding." Everyone turned to look at me. The clerks, the other customers, the security guards, waiting to see if I'd fold, if I'd smooth things over, if I'd be the good daughter one more time. "The only misunderstanding," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "is that you thought I'd stay silent forever." His face went from red to purple, and for one wild moment, I thought he might lunge at me despite the police presence, but the officers were already moving, already asking him to stand, already beginning the ritual of arrest. My mother let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a wail. "Leah, how could you? How could I?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, like I was the one who'd betrayed our family, who'd broken some sacred trust. But I was done answering her questions, done explaining myself, done being grateful for scraps of affection between storms of violence. I turned my back on both of them and walked back to Curtis's window, where my grandmother's title paperwork still sat, unsigned and now unnecessary. "Thank you," I told him. He smiled, those kind eyes crinkling behind his glasses. "You did this, Miss Whitman. You saved yourself." Maybe I had. Maybe that's what my grandmother had seen in me all along. Not just her stubbornness, but her strength. The ability to build something from nothing, to restore what was broken, to know when to hold tight and when to let go. The police led Mitchell out in handcuffs while my mother followed, still pleading, still trying to hold together a family that had never really existed. I stayed at the window, watching them go, feeling something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Free. The post-it note I'd attached to the documentation was small, yellow, and unassuming. But those few lines I'd written in my careful handwriting had set everything in motion. Now, sitting in a quiet corner of the DMV while the chaos of Mitchell's arrest continued outside. I thought about all the words I'd kept inside for 15 years, compressed into that single note. I am the sender, I whispered to myself, the words feeling foreign and powerful, for so long. I'd been the receiver of blows, of insults, of my mother's disappointment, but today I had sent something out into the world, and the world had responded. Patricia returned with a female officer who introduced herself as Detective Sarah Chen. She had tired eyes but a gentle manner, the kind of person who'd seen too much and still believed in helping. Miss Whitman, I know you've been through a lot today, Detective Chen began. But I need to take a formal statement. The more detail you can provide, the stronger the case. The case? It sounded so official, so final. After years of incidents that disappeared into family silence, there would be a case number, a file, a record that couldn't be scratched out or burned. Where do you want me to start? I asked. Wherever feels right to you, she said. Sometimes it helps to begin with today and work backward. So I did. I told her about the 6 a.m. visit, the demand to sign over my grandmother's car, the blow to my throat when I hesitated. But as I spoke, I found myself jumping back in time, memories surfacing like splinters working their way out. When I was 17, I said, my grandmother was dying. She'd been sick for months, and I spent every day after school at the hospice with her. She kept trying to tell me something, but she could barely speak by then. Finally, she managed to write one word, box. Detective Chen leaned forward, listening intently. After she died, I searched everywhere for this box. Mitchell was furious, said I was being morbid, dwelling on the past, but I finally found it hidden in her old workshop, behind some paint cans. Inside was $20,000 in cash and a letter. What did the letter say? I closed my eyes, remembering. It said she knew what was happening at home. She'd seen the bruises, noticed how I flinched when Mitchell entered a room. She'd tried to talk to my mother, but I shrugged. The money was for me to escape when I was ready. She said sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. What happened to the money? Mitchell found it first, I said bitterly. He'd followed me to the workshop one day, watched me find the box. When I came back the next day, it was gone. He claimed he'd never seen it, that I was making it up. My mother believed him, of course, said I was creating fantasies to deal with my grief. Detective Chen made notes, her face carefully neutral. Was there anyone else who knew about the money? Any witnesses? Just Mr. Patterson, my grandmother's lawyer. He'd helped her arrange it, but he had a stroke 2 weeks after she died. Mitchell visited him in the hospital to pay his respects, he said. Mr. Patterson never recovered his ability to speak. The implication hung in the air. I had no proof Mitchell had done anything to the old lawyer, but the timing was too convenient, the pattern too familiar. Tell me about the car, Detective Chen prompted. Why is it so important to him? It's worth money, I said simply. But more than that, it's the last thing of value I own that connects me to someone who loved me. Mitchell can't stand that. He needs to possess everything, control everything. The car represents my grandmother's defiance, and by extension, mine. Through the window, I could see my mother's car still in the parking lot. She'd be waiting, I knew, hoping I'd come out and tell her it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd drop the charges, come home, pretend this never happened, the same script we'd followed so many times before. There's something else, I said suddenly, about why I chose today, why I put the documentation in the DMV folder. Detective Chen waited patiently. I've been seeing a therapist, I admitted. Secretly, paying cash so it wouldn't show up on insurance statements. She told me something last week that stuck with me. She said abusers often feel safest in bureaucratic settings because they believe they can manipulate any system. They bring their victims to banks, government offices, legal proceedings, confident that their public persona will protect them. But sometimes, I continued, that confidence is their weakness. They perform their power so brazenly that they expose themselves. That's what I counted on today. Mitchell was so sure of his control that he brought me to the one place where procedures matter more than personalities. That was very clever, Detective Chen said, and very brave. I'm not brave, I protested. I'm just tired, and I realized something else in therapy. Every time I stayed silent, I wasn't just protecting him, I was protecting my mother from having to choose. But she already chose, years ago. I was just too young to accept it. We talked for another hour, going through incidents, dates, the evidence I'd collected. Detective Chen was thorough but kind, stopping whenever I needed a moment to compose myself. By the end, I felt wrung out but strangely lighter, as if speaking the truth had physically lifted weight from my shoulders. One more question, she said as we finished. Your note mentioned Protocol 7.3.2. How did you know about that? I almost smiled. I work at a women's shelter, part-time, administrative stuff. I've learned a lot about systems designed to protect people. I've also learned how many people don't know these systems exist. I wanted to make sure the DMV knew exactly what procedures to follow. Detective Chen stood, gathering her papers. The prosecutor will be in touch. With the evidence you've provided and today's witnesses, this is a solid case. But I need to warn you. Your mother might try to contact you, convince you to drop the charges. I know, I said. She's probably composing the guilt trip already. How I've ruined Mitchell's career, destroyed our family, embarrassed her in front of everyone. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? My apartment. I'm changing the locks today. I'd already texted a locksmith from the DMV bathroom, using the emergency credit card I'd hidden for 3 years. And my friend is coming to stay with me for a few days. Detective Chen handed me her card. Call me if you need anything, day or night. As she left, Curtis appeared in the doorway. Miss Whitman, I wanted to make sure you were okay before my shift ends. This stranger had shown me more concern in 2 hours than my family had in years. Thank you, I said, meaning it deeply. For everything, for believing me. You made it easy to believe, he said. That documentation was some of the most organized I've ever seen. You should be proud of yourself. Proud. When was the last time anyone had said they were proud of me? My grandmother, probably, telling me I was smart enough for college, strong enough to survive anything. Can I ask you something? I said to Curtis. In all your years working here, how often do you see situations like this? His face grew somber. More often than you'd think. Usually, it's elderly people being coerced by family members. Sometimes it's spouses, partners. The DMV sees a lot because people need documentation for financial crimes. We're trained to watch for signs. And do people usually go through with reporting? Honestly, no. Most back down when the abuser starts making threats or promises. That's what made you different. When Mr. Harmon started yelling, demanding you tell us it was a misunderstanding, you stood your ground. That takes courage most people don't have. I thought about all the times I'd almost spoken up. At the hospital when nurses asked about my injuries. At family gatherings when relatives noticed my flinches. During the few therapy sessions I'd managed before Mitchell found out and my mother canceled them. Each time, I'd backed down, chosen silence over conflict. I wasn't brave before, I said, but I kept the evidence anyway. Some part of me must have known this day would come. Curtis smiled. Your grandmother would be proud. As he walked away, I realized he was right. Grandma would be proud. She'd fought for her place in a world that told her women didn't belong in auto shops. She'd built beautiful machines with her weathered hands and refused to let anyone tell her what was impossible. I gathered my things, including the folder with my grandmother's car title, still unsigned, no longer under threat. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright, making me squint after hours in fluorescent lighting. My mother's car was gone. Mitchell's BMW likely impounded. The parking lot looked ordinary, like nothing momentous had happened here. But everything had changed. I was still Leah Whitman, still 28 years old, still carrying bruises on my throat. But I was no longer silent. I was no longer grateful for scraps of conditional love. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my truth for their comfort. I walked to my grandmother's Mustang. running my hand along its cherry red hood. She'd painted it this color because it was bold, impossible to ignore. "If you're going to take up space in this world," she told me once, "might as well do it in style." My phone had 37 missed calls from my mother, 18 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Mitchell's lawyer or friends. I deleted them all without listening. Then I blocked my mother's number, something I'd never imagined doing before today. There would be consequences, court dates, family drama, the loss of relationships I'd thought I needed. But as I drove away from the DMV in my grandmother's car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. I felt like myself again. The engine purred beneath me, perfectly maintained despite Mitchell's neglect. Through the rearview mirror, I watched the DMV shrink and disappear. Somewhere behind those beige walls, my truth was being processed, filed, officially recognized. The system I'd triggered was in motion, and not even Mitchell's rage or my mother's denial could stop it now. I was the sender. And finally, the message had been received. The police presence at the DMV lasted exactly 8 minutes from the moment they arrived until Mitchell was escorted out in handcuffs. I know because I watched the clock above window 4 counting each second like a heartbeat. 8 minutes to dismantle 15 years of terror. 8 minutes for the system to do what my mother never could. Protect me. I stood by Curtis's window, my legs shaking but holding firm. As the scene unfolded with bureaucratic efficiency, the first officer, a tall black woman with sergeant stripes, had approached Mitchell with professional calm. "Mr. Harmon, we need you to come with us." "This is ridiculous," Mitchell had sputtered, his face cycling through shades of red I'd seen before, but never in public. "My stepdaughter is having some kind of breakdown. She's always been unstable." The sergeant's expression didn't change. "Sir, please stand and turn around. I want to speak to my wife." He gestured wildly toward my mother, who stood frozen like a deer in headlights. "Diana, tell them about her mental health issues." My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. For once, she had no script for this situation, no way to smooth things over with a smile and a gentle lie. "Mr. Harmon, I won't ask again," the sergeant said, her hand moving to her radio. That's when Mitchell made his mistake. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and took an aggressive step toward the officers. "You can't just arrest me based on some hysterical girl's lies." The second officer, younger and clearly ready for trouble, stepped forward. "Sir, step back." "I know my rights." Mitchell's voice boomed through the DMV, causing everyone to stop and stare. The careful businessman facade was crumbling, revealing the man I'd known in private, volatile, entitled, dangerous when cornered. "Then you know you're under arrest for assault and battery," the sergeant said smoothly. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his rights, Mitchell's eyes found mine across the crowded room. The look he gave me was pure venom, a promise of retribution if he ever got the chance. But for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I met his stare, unflinching, until the officers turned him around to apply the handcuffs. "This isn't over. Leah," he shouted as they led him toward the door. "You're going to regret this. You hear me? You're going to regret destroying this family." My mother finally found her voice then, trailing after them. "Wait, this is all a misunderstanding. Mitchell isn't violent, Leah. Tell them you made a mistake." But I said nothing. I'd said everything I needed to say in the 5 pages of documentation Curtis had passed to the police, in the photos of bruises tagged with dates and times, in the medical records that told a story of systematic abuse disguised as accidents and clumsiness. The sergeant paused at the door, looking back at me. "Miss Whitman, an officer will stay to take your full statement. You did the right thing." The right thing. Such a simple phrase for such a complicated action. After they left, the DMV slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Numbers were called. Licenses were renewed. Vehicles were registered. But I caught the glances, heard the whispers. I'd become part of the building's lore, the woman who'd turned a title transfer into an arrest. "Ma'am?" A young officer with kind eyes approached me. I'm Officer Martinez. I'll be taking your statement. Is there somewhere private we can talk? Patricia appeared as if summoned, leading us back to the same office where I'd first explained my situation. As I settled into the chair again, I heard my phone buzzing incessantly in my purse. My mother, no doubt, probably standing in the parking lot, trying to figure out how to salvage this situation. Before we start, Officer Martinez said, pulling out a digital recorder, I want you to know that you're safe here. Take your time. Safe. When had I last felt truly safe? Maybe at 17, sitting in my grandmother's workshop, listening to her stories about rebuilding engines while she taught me that broken things could be fixed, but only if you acknowledged they were broken in the first place. I started from the beginning, not this morning, but the real beginning. The day Mitchell moved in when I was 13. How he'd immediately started changing the rules of our house. No locks on bedroom doors. No phone calls without permission. No visiting friends without detailed itineraries. It started small, I explained. Things that seemed like concerned parenting. My mother was so grateful to have help after being a single mom for years. She didn't see how he was isolating me. Officer Martinez nodded, making notes. When did it become physical? 6 months after the wedding, I'd stayed after school for a study group and forgot to call. When I got home, he was waiting. My mother was at her book club. He grabbed me by the throat and pinned me against the wall. Said I'd disrespected him for the last time. Did you tell your mother? She came home to find me crying in my room. Marks on my neck. Mitchell told her I'd been mouthy, that he'd had to restrain me when I tried to hit him. She believed him, said I needed to try harder to get along with my new father. The pattern established itself quickly after that. Mitchell would wait until my mother was absent or distracted, then find reasons to discipline me. A dish left in the sink became a screaming lecture about respect. A B on a test resulted in being shoved down the stairs. An accident. He'd tell my mother when she found me at the bottom. The worst part, I said, my voice catching, was how he'd act afterward. So concerned, so apologetic in front of her. He'd even drive me to the emergency room, playing the worried stepfather. The nurses would give him sympathetic looks while I sat there, knowing I couldn't say anything because my mother would take his side. But you started documenting, Officer Martinez observed. When I was 19, I'd gotten a job at a women's shelter, filing paperwork. I saw women come in with stories like mine, saw how the ones with documentation had better outcomes in court, so I started keeping records. Your mother never suspected. I laughed bitterly. She suspected. She just chose not to know. It's amazing what people can ignore when the truth is inconvenient. We went through incident after incident, date after date. The time he threw me into a wall, leaving a hole my mother blamed on moving furniture. The night he burned my acceptance letter to an out-of-state college because family stays together. The afternoon he found my hidden savings and took it to teach me about trust. Today was different, though, Officer Martinez said. What changed? I thought about it, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I decided enough was enough. Maybe it was the therapy sessions, learning about trauma bonds and cycles of abuse. Maybe it was working at the shelter, seeing women who'd escaped and built new lives. Or maybe it was simply that I'd finally accumulated enough pain to outweigh my fear. He wanted my grandmother's car, I said simply. The last thing I had that was truly mine, that connected me to someone who saw my worth. When he showed up this morning, demanding I sign it over, something in me just broke. Or maybe something finally fixed itself. I realized I'd rather lose everything fighting back than lose myself staying silent. Officer Martinez turned off the recorder. That took incredible courage, Miss Whitman. Many people never reach that point. It didn't feel like courage, I admitted. It felt like survival instinct finally kicking in. A knock on the door interrupted us. Patricia peered in, looking apologetic. Miss Whitman, there's a woman outside claiming to be your mother. She's becoming quite agitated, demanding to see you. Of course she was. Diana Harmon had spent 15 years perfecting the art of public victimhood. She'd be out there now, tears perfectly placed, story already crafted about her troubled daughter and patient husband. I don't want to see her, I said firmly. We can have her removed from the premises, Officer Martinez offered. You're under no obligation to speak with her. I considered it, then shook my head. No, let her wait. She's good at waiting. Waited 15 years to protect me, after all. The interview continued for another hour. By the end, I'd given them everything: names, dates, hospital records, the pattern of financial abuse interwoven with physical violence. Officer Martinez assured me the prosecutor would find it more than sufficient. What happens to Mitchell now? I asked as we wrapped up. He'll be processed, probably make bail within 24 hours. But with the evidence you've provided and multiple witnesses to his behavior today, the charges will stick. There will likely be a restraining order put in place immediately. A restraining order, a piece of paper that said Mitchell couldn't come near me. It seemed both too simple and not enough, but it was a start. As Officer Martinez left, I sat alone in the small office, surrounded by the echo of my own truth finally spoken. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see normal DMV life continuing, people complaining about wait times, clerks processing routine paperwork, the mundane machinery of bureaucracy grinding on. But for me, everything had shifted. 8 minutes had rewritten 15 years. 8 minutes had shown me that systems could work, that documentation mattered, that speaking up wasn't pointless. 8 minutes had set me free. My phone buzzed again. This time, I looked at the screen. 43 missed calls from my mother, 18 from unknown numbers, 6 voicemails I'd never listened to. I turned the phone off completely, savoring the silence. When I finally emerged from the office, the DMV was less crowded. Afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting golden rectangles on the worn carpet. Curtis was still at window 4 helping an elderly man with registration renewal. He caught my eye and nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement and support. I nodded back, then walked past the waiting area where my mother had been, past the chairs where Mitchell had sat in handcuffs, past all the spaces that had contained my fear for so long. The automatic doors opened, and I stepped into the afternoon air. Somewhere, Mitchell was being booked. Somewhere, my mother was crafting her narrative of betrayal. But here, now, I stood in a DMV parking lot, breathing freely for the first time in 15 years. 8 minutes, that's all it had taken for the system to see what my mother had refused to see. 8 minutes for strangers to believe what family had denied. 8 minutes to begin the rest of my life. My mother's first text arrived at 3:47 p.m. How could you do this to us? By 4:15 p.m., she'd sent 23 more messages, each one a masterclass in emotional manipulation. I sat in my apartment, door locked with the new deadbolt I'd had installed by an emergency locksmith, reading each message as it arrived, not because I cared what she had to say, but because I was documenting everything. Old habits die hard. Mitchell is in jail because of your lies. The neighbors saw everything. We're humiliated. I'm at the police station. They won't let me see him. Your father would be ashamed of you. Answer your phone. Leah, we need to fix this. You've destroyed our family. I'm coming to your apartment. We need to talk. That last one made me look up from my phone. She didn't have a key to my new locks, but I wouldn't put it past her to make a scene in the hallway. I texted my friend Sarah, who'd promised to come by after her shift at the hospital. She might show up, I typed. Can you come earlier? Already on my way, Sarah responded immediately. Picked up Thai food and wine. You're not facing this alone. Alone. For years. That word had felt like a punishment. Now it felt like freedom. I was choosing who to let into my space, my life, my struggles. The power of that choice was intoxicating. My phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miss Whitman. An unfamiliar male voice, professional and cold. This is Robert Kellerman, Mr. Harmon's attorney. I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding today that we can clear up quickly if you're willing to be reasonable. Reasonable, there it was. The word that had controlled me for years. Be reasonable. Leah, don't make a fuss. Think of others. Be the bigger person. There's no misunderstanding. Mr. Kellerman, I said. surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Your client assaulted me. Multiple witnesses saw his violent behavior at the DMV. I have 15 years of documentation. What exactly needs clarification? Miss Whitman, I understand you're upset, but surely you don't want to see your stepfather imprisoned over what was clearly a momentary loss of temper. These family disputes can be resolved without destroying a man's career and reputation. His career? I almost laughed. What about my life? What about the years of therapy I'll need? What about the opportunities I lost because I was too scared to leave the state for college? I'm sure we can come to a financial arrangement that would compensate you for any inconvenience. Now I did laugh, sharp and bitter. He's trying to buy his way out. With what money? The loan he was going to get using my car, or maybe the funds he stole from my college account. I don't think you understand the situation. Kellerman's voice hardened. If this goes to trial, your entire history will be examined, your mental health records, your work at a women's shelter that might have given you ideas, your pattern of making accusations. Stop, I interrupted. My pattern is documented with medical records, photos, and police reports that my mother convinced me to withdraw. You want to examine my history? Please do. Let's put it all on public record. Every bruise, every theft, every time my mother chose him over me. I'm sure the jury will find it fascinating. Silence on the other end. Then, you're making a mistake, Miss Whitman. No, I said. I made a mistake staying silent for 15 years. I'm finally correcting it. Don't contact me again except through my attorney. You have an attorney. I will by tomorrow. I hung up before he could respond. The adrenaline from the conversation left me shaky. I made myself a cup of tea, noting how my hands trembled as I poured the water. This was what fighting back felt like, terrifying and empowering in equal measure. My mother's car pulled into the parking lot just as Sarah arrived. I watched from my window as they met in the lot. My mother immediately trying to engage Sarah in conversation, but Sarah, bless her, simply walked past with her bags of food, ignoring my mother's increasingly frantic calls. The buzzer rang moments later. It's me, Sarah's voice crackled through the intercom. Fair warning, your mom's right behind me. I buzzed her in, hearing my mother's voice in the background. I just need 5 minutes with my daughter. Sarah appeared at my door slightly out of breath, arms full of takeout bags and a bottle of wine. Behind her, I could hear my mother's heels on the stairs. Inside, quick, I said, pulling Sarah in and closing the door just as my mother reached the landing. The knocking started immediately. Leah, open this door, I'm your mother. Sarah set down the food and gave me a look. You okay? I nodded, though my heart was racing. The knocking intensified. Leah Marie Whitman, you open this door right now. We need to discuss what you've done. What I've done, I repeated quietly. Always what I've done. Should I call the police? Sarah whispered. I shook my head. Let her knock. She'll tire herself out. But my mother was nothing if not persistent. For 20 minutes, she alternated between knocking, pleading, and threatening. The other residents began peering out their doors, and I heard Mr. Chen from 4B tell her to keep it down. My daughter is having a mental health crisis, my mother announced to the hallway. I'm trying to help her. That did it. I yanked open the door so suddenly she nearly fell forward. A mental health crisis, I said, loud enough for the gathered neighbors to hear. Is that what you're calling it when someone finally reports 15 years of abuse? My mother's perfectly composed face crumbled for just a moment before reassembling into wounded motherhood. Leah, sweetheart, you're not well. Let me in so we can talk privately. No, the word came out firm, final. You want to talk? Let's talk right here. Tell everyone how you knew Mitchell hit me. Tell them about the time you walked in on him choking me and asked what I'd done to make him angry. Tell them about... Stop, she glanced frantically at the watching neighbors. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. I looked at her then. Really looked. Beneath the perfect makeup. She seemed older, smaller. The strain of maintaining her illusions was finally showing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You had 15 years of minutes, I said. You spent them all on him. He's my husband. I was your daughter, I countered. Was past tense, because you chose him over me every single time. That's not true, I love you. You love the idea of me, I said. A quiet, compliant daughter who never causes problems. But the real me, the one who was scared and hurt and begging for help, you couldn't love her enough to protect her. Sarah stepped up beside me, a quiet show of support. My mother's eyes narrowed at her. You, she spat. You've been filling her head with ideas. This shelter work, this victim mentality. Mrs. Harmon, Sarah interrupted calmly, I think you should leave before Leah has to call the police. She's asked you to go. I'm not leaving until my daughter agrees to drop these ridiculous charges. Mitchell made one mistake. One mistake. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the folder of photos I'd kept hidden. Here's his one mistake from 2019. A photo of my bruised ribs. Here's his one mistake from 2020. Fingerprints on my throat. Here's his one mistake from last Christmas. A black eye I'd had to explain away at work. My mother turned away. I don't want to see those. Of course you don't, I said. You never wanted to see, but they're real. They happened, and you let them happen. I didn't know. You knew. My voice was quiet now, tired. You knew every time. You just loved your comfortable life more than you loved me. She slapped me, quick and sharp across the face, just like this morning. But this time, I was ready. This time, I had witnesses. Did everyone see that? I asked the hallway. Several neighbors nodded, including Mr. Chen, who already had his phone out. Recording? My mother stepped back, horrified at what she'd done in public. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said, touching my stinging cheek. Just like Mitchell never meant it. You're perfect for each other. Leah, please. Leave, I said. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't text. If you need to communicate with me, do it through lawyers. We're done. You can't just cut me out of your life. I'm your mother. No, I said, stepping back into my apartment. You're his wife. You made that choice a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting it. I closed the door on her protests, engaging both locks, through the peephole. I watched her stand there for another moment before Mr. Chen suggested she leave before someone called building security. Sarah wrapped an arm around my shoulders as we listened to my mother's heels retreat down the stairs. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. I actually am. We sat on my couch, Thai food containers spread on the coffee table, and I told Sarah about the rest of the day. She'd heard pieces over the years, had been the one to drive me to the ER more than once, but this was the first time I'd laid it all out chronologically. The worst part, I said, twirling pad thai on my fork, is that somewhere in her mind, she's the victim in all this. Mitchell's in jail. I've embarrassed her publicly, and she has to face her book club knowing everyone's talking about her family drama. Narcissist gonna narcissist, Sarah said, refilling my wine glass. But you broke the cycle. That matters. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from my mother, but there was also a text from Curtis at the DMV. Heard the arrest went smoothly. Your grandmother would be proud. Take care of yourself. A stranger's kindness meaning more than my mother's tears. That seemed to sum up my life perfectly. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now. I took a sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Now I press charges. I testify. I get a restraining order. I live my life without looking over my shoulder. I maybe sell the apartment and move somewhere they don't know the address. And your mom. I thought about it. The woman who'd given birth to me, who'd once sung lullabies and kissed scraped knees, that woman had disappeared the day she'd chosen Mitchell's version of events over her daughter's truth. What remained was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. She's not my mom anymore, I said finally. She's just someone I used to know. The words hurt to say, but they also felt right. True. Like putting down a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. Later, after Sarah had left with promises to check in tomorrow. I sat in my quiet apartment and opened my laptop. The email to the women's shelter where I volunteered wrote itself. Dear team, I wanted to let you know that today I finally used the knowledge you've all taught me. I reported my abuser. The system worked exactly like we tell our clients it will. Documentation matters. Speaking up matters. Thank you for showing me that survival is possible. Leah. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. My phone buzzed one more time. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Whitman. A woman's voice, warm and professional. This is Patricia from the DMV. I'm calling from my personal phone. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to check that you got home safely. Tears pricked my eyes. I did, thank you. I also wanted you to know that we've had 3 other women come forward since this afternoon. Apparently, seeing Mitchell arrested gave them courage. Your bravery started something. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. Take care of yourself, Miss Whitman. What you did today. It mattered, to more people than you know. After she hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, processing her words. 3 other women, 3 other people Mitchell had hurt, who'd stayed silent until today. My documentation, my little yellow post-it note, my refusal to sign, it had created ripples I'd never imagined. I thought about my mother, probably home now, making Mitchell's favorite meal for when he made bail tomorrow, playing the devoted wife, the victim of her ungrateful daughter's lies. She'd never understand what I'd done or why. She'd go to her grave believing I'd betrayed our family. But family isn't blood. Family is the people who believe you, who stand beside you, who choose your safety over their comfort. Today I discovered more family among strangers at the DMV than I'd ever had at home. My mother could have her version of the story. I had the truth. And finally, that was enough. The official letter from the DMV arrived 3 days later, delivered by certified mail that required my signature. The postal worker, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, waited patiently as I signed for it, my hands trembling slightly. Important document, she asked gently. Yes, I said, holding the envelope like it might disappear. Very important. Inside my apartment, I carefully opened the envelope. The letterhead was official, imposing in its bureaucratic authority, but the words were what made me sink onto my couch, tears streaming down my face. Dear Miss Whitman, this letter serves as official confirmation that your documentation submitted on September 23rd has been forwarded to the following agencies as per Protocol 7.3.2. 1. The State Department of Administrative Services, Human Resources Division 2, the County Prosecutor's Office, Domestic Violence Unit 3, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence Legal Advocacy Program. Your case has been assigned reference number DV-2I-24-3847. Please retain this number for all future correspondence. Additionally, we wish to inform you that Mr. Mitchell Harmon's vehicle operator privileges have been suspended pending investigation, and any attempts to transfer vehicle ownership under duress have been nullified. The DMV takes all reports of coercion and domestic violence seriously. Your courage in coming forward has not only protected your assets, but has potentially prevented future incidents. Sincerely, Curtis Washington, Supervisor, Vehicle Registration Division. Curtis, he'd signed it himself. Not with a stamp or auto-signature. This wasn't just bureaucratic procedure. This was personal acknowledgement. I read the letter 3 more times, memorizing each word. The reference number, DV 2024-3847, felt like a badge of validation. After years of incidents that vanished into family silence, I had a number, official, trackable, real. My laptop chimed with a new email. The sender made my stomach tighten. Human Resources, State Administrative Services. Mitchell Harmon, Administrative Consultant Contract. Miss Whitman, we have received documentation regarding Mr. Harmon as part of an official DMV report, as he is contracted to provide services to multiple state agencies. This matter falls under our jurisdiction. Effective immediately. Mr. Harmon's security clearance and building access have been revoked pending a full investigation. We take allegations of violence very seriously, particularly when the accused has access to vulnerable populations through their work. We may need to contact you for additional information. In the meantime, please be assured that Mr. Harmon will have no access to state buildings or databases. If you have any safety concerns, please contact our security division immediately. I stared at the screen, a strange mix of satisfaction and grief washing over me. Mitchell's precious career, the one he lorded over everyone, was crumbling. He'd spent years telling me I was worthless, would never amount to anything, was lucky to have a roof over my head. Now his own roof was collapsing. My phone rang. Sarah. "Hey," she said without preamble. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" "Check Channel 7's website, now." I pulled up the site, and there it was. State contractor arrested at DMV in domestic violence case. The article was brief but damning, including the detail that multiple agencies were now investigating previous complaints. 3 other women have filed reports since Mitchell's arrest, the article stated. Sources indicate these women, who wish to remain anonymous, stated that seeing Harmon arrested gave them the courage to come forward about their own experiences. 3 women, Patricia from the DMV had mentioned them, but seeing it in print made it real. Mitchell hadn't just terrorized me. There were others. How many had stayed silent? How many had my mother dismissed as liars or troublemakers? Another email appeared, this one from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made me freeze. "Thank you for your courage. Dear Miss Whitman, you don't know me, but I know Mitchell Harmon. I was his secretary at his previous job, before the state contracts, for 2 years. I endured inappropriate comments, accidental touches, and violent outbursts when I made minor mistakes. I never reported it. He was careful, always apologizing afterward, always making sure there were no witnesses. When I finally quit, he told me no one would believe a hysterical woman over a respected businessman. Seeing him arrested at the DMV, reading that someone had finally documented everything and stood up to him, you gave me hope. I've already contacted the prosecutor's office. I have emails, texts, even a recording from my phone of one of his tirades. You don't have to respond to this. I just needed you to know that what you did matters. You stopped him. You saved others from going through what we endured. Thank you, M. I read the email through tears. M. Another initial. Another woman reduced to a letter to protect herself from Mitchell's wrath. But she was speaking up now. The silence was breaking. A sharp knock on my door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw a well-dressed woman with a briefcase. "Miss Whitman, I'm Jennifer Brooks from the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I received your file from the DMV. May I come in?" I verified her credentials through the crack in the door before letting her in. She settled on my couch with practiced ease, pulling out a legal pad. "First, I want to commend you on your documentation," she began. "In my 20 years doing this work, I've rarely seen such comprehensive records. You've made our job much easier." "I learned at the shelter," I said. "Document everything, date everything, save everything." "It shows. Now, let's discuss next steps. The prosecutor will be building a case, but you also have civil options: restraining orders, potential lawsuits for damages, theft of assets." "Theft of assets." She smiled grimly. "Your college fund, your grandmother's money, the attempted theft of the vehicle. Financial abuse is abuse, Miss Whitman, and from what I can see, Miss Harmon has a pattern." We talked for 2 hours. Jennifer was thorough, professional, but also kind. She'd seen too many cases like mine. She said, too many women whose mothers chose their abusers, too many families destroyed by one person's violence and another's complicity. "Your mother," she said carefully. "Have you heard from her?" 67 calls, 43 texts, and 12 emails, I said. All variations on the same theme. I've ruined everything. Mitchell is suffering. The family is destroyed. I'm selfish and ungrateful. "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question. Free? I said finally. Sad, angry, grieving the mother I never really had, but mostly free. Jennifer nodded. That's normal, healthy, even. You're mourning the relationship you deserved but never got. But you're also recognizing your worth. That's powerful. After she left, promising to be in touch about court dates and procedures, I sat with her words, my worth, for so long. I'd measured my value by how little trouble I caused, how much I could endure, how well I could keep secrets. Now I was learning a different metric, how much truth I could tell, how much justice I could seek, how much space I could claim in the world. Another knock, gentler this time. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stood in the hallway with a covered dish. I heard about the other day, she said simply. With your mother, I brought lasagna. I accepted the dish, blinking back tears. Thank you. I had a husband like that once, she said quietly. Before Mr. Patterson, nobody believed me either. But you know what? The day I finally left, the day I stopped protecting him from consequences, that was the day I started living. You're brave, dear. Don't let anyone tell you different. After she left, I heated up a portion of the lasagna and ate it standing at my kitchen counter, looking at the wall where I'd hung the DMV letter, my official validation, my proof that the system could work, that speaking up mattered, that documentation could topple a careful constructed lie. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Leah, this is Pastor Williams from your mother's church. I'm calling to offer counseling services to help repair your family. Your mother is devastated, and Mitchell is a good man who made a mistake. Please call me so we can arrange a meeting to discuss forgiveness and healing. I deleted the message without listening to it again. They could keep their version of forgiveness that required me to be silent. I was finding my own healing, one that centered on truth rather than comfort. As evening fell, I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Not another report or documentation, but something new, a blog post, a story, my story. My name is Leah Whitman, I typed. I am a survivor of 15 years of domestic abuse. This is what survival looks like. I wrote about the bruises hidden under makeup, the excuses that became second nature, the mother who chose blindness over protection. I wrote about the grandmother who saw the truth and tried to help. I wrote about the day I slipped documentation into a DMV folder and let the system do what family wouldn't. To anyone reading this who recognizes their own story, I concluded, know this. Your pain is real. Your documentation matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. The system isn't perfect, but it's there. Use it. Break the silence. Save yourself, because no one else will do it for you. Before I could lose my nerve, I published the post. Within an hour, it had been shared 12 times. By morning, it would go viral, reaching thousands of women who needed to hear that survival was possible. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I'd told my truth. Officially and publicly, Mitchell could no longer gaslight me. My mother could no longer minimize what happened. The documentation existed, filed in triplicate, stamped with government seals, impossible to burn or scratch out. I was officially a survivor. The DMV letter said so, and for the first time in 15 years, I believed it too. The second letter arrived on a Thursday morning, this time from the State Department of Administrative Services. The envelope was thicker, heavier with the weight of official consequence. I signed for it with steady hands. Amazing how quickly you can get used to certified mail when it brings justice instead of threats. Inside were multiple documents, but one stood out: Mitchell's termination letter, copied to me as the complainant. The language was bureaucratic, but devastating, following investigation into credible allegations of domestic violence, including documented evidence provided by multiple sources. Your consulting contract with the state of Colorado is terminated effective immediately. But it was the next paragraph that made me sit down. Furthermore, you are hereby barred from bidding on any state contracts for a minimum of 10 years. Your name has been added to the state vendor debarment list. Any attempt to circumvent this ban through subsidiary companies or partnerships will result in criminal fraud charges. 10 years, a decade of Mitchell being unable to access his primary source of income, and more importantly, his source of prestige. He'd always introduced himself as a state contractor, wearing it like a badge of honor. Now it was a scarlet letter he couldn't remove. The final document was a letter addressed directly to me from the Director of Human Resources. Miss Whitman, I want to personally thank you for your courage in reporting Mr. Harmon. Upon investigation, we discovered he had been using his position to access confidential information about state employees, particularly women in junior positions. Your documentation helped us identify a pattern of predatory behavior that might have continued indefinitely without your intervention. 3 female state employees have since filed complaints. One revealed that Mr. Harmon had accessed her personal address through our database and appeared at her home uninvited. This constitutes a severe breach of ethics and possibly criminal stalking. I deeply regret that our vetting process failed to identify Mr. Harmon's character. However, your actions have prevented future harm and helped us strengthen our contractor screening procedures. The state owes you a debt of gratitude. Sincerely, Margaret Chen, Director, Human Resources. I read that line again. The state owes you a debt of gratitude. Not my family, who should have protected me, not my mother, who should have believed me, but the state, that impersonal, bureaucratic machine that Mitchell had thought he controlled. They were grateful. They believed me. They acted. My laptop pinged with an email from Jennifer Brooks, my advocate from the coalition. Leah, thought you should see this. Mitchell's lawyer filed a motion claiming defamation and conspiracy to destroy livelihood. The judge threw it out in less than 5 minutes. Quote, documentation is not defamation. Consequences are not conspiracy. Motion denied with prejudice. Also, the forensic accountant found something interesting. Over the past 5 years, Mitchell has taken out loans totaling $73,000 using forged signatures. Your grandmother's car was going to be collateral for loan number 8. We need to discuss filing criminal fraud charges. Call when you're ready. Jennifer. Fraud. Of course, the violence was just one tool in Mitchell's arsenal. The theft was another. I thought about all the times money had mysteriously disappeared, all the investments that failed, all the family emergencies that required immediate cash. How much of it had been legitimate? How much had been another form of abuse? My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. I was getting braver about unknown calls now that most of them brought support instead of threats. Miss Whitman, this is Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Division. I've been assigned to investigate the fraud aspects of your case. Could we schedule a time to review financial documents? Yes, I said immediately. I have bank statements going back 7 years, credit reports showing accounts I never opened, loan documents with signatures that aren't mine. You've been documenting financial irregularities too. He sounded impressed. My grandmother taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 10, I said. She said women who don't watch their money end up dependent on men who don't deserve them. I think she knew what was coming. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. After hanging up, I went to my closet and pulled out a box I'd hidden behind winter coats. Inside were years of financial records, each suspicious transaction highlighted, each forged signature photographed next to my real one for comparison. I'd started collecting these after the college fund disappeared. Mitchell had claimed it was invested in a can't-miss opportunity that went belly up, but I'd found the real paper trail, cash withdrawals matching his gambling debts, transfers to a woman's name I didn't recognize, purchases of electronics that never made it to our house. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Check Mitchell's Facebook. You need to see this. I rarely looked at social media anymore, but curiosity won. Mitchell's profile was public. He'd always been too arrogant to use privacy settings. His latest post, from an hour ago. Being persecuted for trying to help an ungrateful, mentally unstable stepdaughter, some people are born victims and blame everyone else for their failures. Prayers appreciated during this difficult time of false accusations. The truth will come out. The comments were a mix. Some of his golf buddies offering support, talking about crazy women and Me Too gone too far. But others were interesting. Mitchell, you owe me $5,000 from 2019. Stop playing victim and pay your debts. This is the man who screamed at my daughter until she cried at the DMV last year. Glad someone finally reported him. I worked with Mitchell. HR had multiple complaints about his behavior. This isn't persecution, it's consequences. And then, buried in the comments, one that made my heart stop. Mitchell Harmon destroyed my sister's life 20 years ago. Same pattern. Charming at first, then controlling, then violent. She never recovered. Thank God someone finally stopped him. 20 years ago, before my mother, how many women had Mitchell hurt? How many families had he destroyed while everyone looked the other way? I screenshotted everything before he could delete it. More documentation, more evidence, more proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't vindictive, wasn't the problem. A knock at my door made me tense until I looked through the peephole. Mrs. Patterson was back, this time with cookies and a newspaper. "Thought you should see this, dear," she said, handing me the local paper. The headline on page 3 read, "State Contractor Arrests Spark Review of Vendor Screening." The article detailed how my case had prompted an audit of all state contractors with access to sensitive information. 3 others had already been flagged for review based on previously ignored complaints. "You did that," Mrs. Patterson said proudly. "One brave girl with a folder of truth, and look what happened." After she left, I sat with the newspaper, tracing the words with my finger. Systemic change. That's what Jennifer had called it. My documentation hadn't just saved me. It was changing how the state did business, how they protected their employees, how they vetted contractors. My mother would hate this, the public shame of it all. Her book club would have read this article. Her church friends would whisper about it. The family reputation she'd sacrificed her daughter to protect was destroyed anyway. But by Mitchell's actions and her complicity, not my truth-telling. Another email popped up, this one from a name that made me freeze: Diana Harmon. Subject, "Please read, from your mother." I almost deleted it unopened, but something made me click.
Leah.
Mitchell's lawyer says you've destroyed any chance he had of working again. Says you've filed fraud charges now too. Says you're determined to put him in prison. I won't beg anymore. You've made your choice. You've chosen revenge over family. But I need you to know something. That money from your college fund, I knew he took it. The jewelry he said was lost. I saw him pawn it. The bruises you tried to hide, I saw them all. I knew. I always knew. I just loved him more than I loved you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just tired of pretending. Your father, your real father, left because I cheated. With Mitchell. You were 3. Mitchell promised to take care of us both if I chose him. So I did. I chose him over your father, and I've been choosing him over you ever since. I'm moving to Arizona to live with my sister. Mitchell can figure out his own life. I'm done choosing him. Too late for you. I know, but I'm done. I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you deserved. Diana. Peace. Your grandmother left something else. A safety deposit box at First National. Box 472. I was supposed to give you the key when you turned 25, but Mitchell said to wait. The key is taped under the kitchen drawer in your old room. If you ever go back to the house, it's yours. I read the email 3 times. Each word a revelation and a wound. She knew. She'd always known. Every gaslit conversation. Every time she'd called me dramatic or troubled. Every instance of taking his side. It had all been conscious choice, not ignorance. Part of me wanted to rage. Part of me wanted to cry. But mostly, I felt empty. And then, strangely, free. The wondering was over. The hoping that maybe, somehow, she hadn't really known. That was done. She knew. She chose him, and now she was running away to Arizona to avoid the consequences. At least she'd finally told the truth. That was more than I'd expected. I forwarded her email to Jennifer with a note, evidence of knowledge and complicity. Also, possible hidden assets from my grandmother. Within minutes, Jennifer replied, "This is huge. Admission of knowledge makes her potentially liable, and if there are hidden assets, that could change everything. Can you get to the house safely?" I thought about it. The house where I'd grown up, where I'd been hurt, where I'd learned to be silent. Did I want to go back? Could I? Then I thought about my grandmother, still trying to protect me from beyond the grave, leaving me secrets and escape routes, knowing that someday I'd be brave enough to use them. "I'll go tomorrow," I typed back, "with a police escort if possible." "Already arranging it," Jennifer responded. "We'll also need that safety deposit box opened. If your grandmother documented things too?" My grandmother, of course she would have. Where else did I learn it from? She'd probably been collecting evidence too, waiting for me to be strong enough to use it. I closed my laptop and went to stand by my window, looking out at the normal evening traffic. People living their normal lives. 2 weeks ago, I'd been trapped in a nightmare that everyone told me was normal. Now I was free. And it was Mitchell's turn to feel trapped. The second copy of the documentation had done its job. The state had responded. The financial crimes were being investigated. 3 other women had found their voices. Systems were changing. Mitchell was finished. But there was still that safety deposit box waiting. Still secrets my grandmother had hidden. Still more truth to be uncovered. Tomorrow, I'd go back to that house one last time, not as the scared girl who'd fled in the night, but as the woman who'd brought down Mitchell Harmon with nothing but documentation and courage. My grandmother would be proud. The house stood exactly as I'd left it 6 years ago when I'd finally escaped to my own apartment. Same manicured lawn, same pristine white fence, same lie of suburban perfection. But now I saw it differently, not as a home, but as a crime scene where my childhood had been murdered slowly, quietly, behind closed doors. Officer Daniels stood beside me at the gate. "Take your time, Miss Whitman. We're here as long as you need." I had 3 escorts. Officer Daniels, Jennifer from the coalition, and a locksmith in case Mitchell had changed the locks. But the key I'd kept hidden for 6 years still worked. The door opened to familiar smells. My mother's favorite vanilla candles mixed with the lingering scent of Mitchell's cologne. Even now, even empty, the house reeked of him. "My old room is upstairs," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Second door on the left." We climbed the stairs together, past the family photos my mother had curated so carefully. There I was at 13, Mitchell's hand on my shoulder, my smile forced. At 16, standing between them at Christmas, the bruise on my arm hidden by a carefully chosen long-sleeve sweater. At 18, graduation day, already planning my escape. My room had been converted to a guest bedroom, all traces of me erased, but the kitchen drawer unit in the corner remained, too heavy to move, too built in to replace. I knelt beside it, feeling underneath until my fingers found the envelope taped to the underside. Inside was a small key and a letter in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. "My dearest Leah, if you're reading this, you're finally free. I'm sorry I couldn't do more while I was alive. Your mother wouldn't listen, and the law wouldn't help without your word against his. So I did what I could. I documented everything. The box has photographs, recordings, and $50,000 in bonds I bought in your name only. There's also something else, evidence about Mitchell from before he met your mother. Use it wisely. You are stronger than you know. All my love, Grandma Rose." $50,000, and evidence from before. My hands shook as I pocketed the key. "We should check the rest of the house," Jennifer suggested. "With your mother gone and Mitchell in custody, there might be other relevant documents." We found more than documents. In Mitchell's home office, locked in a filing cabinet that the locksmith opened, we discovered his trophy collection, IDs and personal items from women, dating back 25 years, driver's licenses, pieces of jewelry, even a hospital bracelet with a woman's name I didn't recognize. "Serial predator behavior," Officer Daniels said grimly, photographing everything. "Keeping souvenirs. This is going to the FBI." In my mother's desk, we found her own documentation, Not of Mitchell's abuse, but of his financial crimes, bank statements, forged documents, even a recording device with a tape labeled Mitchell Confession, Insurance. She'd been building her own exit strategy, protecting herself while leaving me to burn. "This is evidence of conspiracy," Jennifer said. She wasn't just complicit. She was an active participant in the financial fraud. I felt nothing, no surprise, no fresh betrayal, just confirmation of what her email had already told me. She'd always known, always chosen him, always protected herself first. At First National Bank, the safety deposit box revealed my grandmother's final gifts, the bonds, as promised. Photos of young Mitchell with women who looked frightened, dated on the back with names and before and after labels. A cassette tape labeled Mitchell Threatening Rose, June 1999, and a thick folder of newspaper clippings about missing women in 3 states where Mitchell had lived. But it was the letter at the bottom that stopped my heart. "Leah, Mitchell Harmon isn't his real name. He's Marcus Hamilton, wanted for questioning in 3 states for assault, fraud, and the disappearance of Jennifer Walsh in 1998. I hired a private investigator when he started dating your mother. By the time I got the results, they were already married, and you were in danger. I tried to tell your mother. She said I was a jealous old woman trying to ruin her happiness. I went to the police, but without proof of current crimes. They wouldn't act on decades-old suspicions. So I waited, and I watched, and I documented, and I prayed that someday you'd be strong enough to use this information. The investigator's full report is here. His contact information is current as of 2018. He said he'd testify if you ever needed him. Strike hard, strike fast, and don't look back. Grandma." Mitchell wasn't even Mitchell. Everything about him was a lie, built on the bones of women who'd come before me, women who might not have survived him. "Holy shit," Officer Daniels said, reading over my shoulder. "Excuse my language, but this is huge. We need to get this to the FBI immediately." The rest happened quickly. FBI agents arrived within hours. The evidence was cataloged, cross-referenced with cold cases. By evening, Mitchell, Marcus, whoever he was, faced federal charges that made the state charges look like parking tickets. Jennifer drove me home, both of us silent until we reached my apartment. "You know what this means?" she finally asked. "You didn't just save yourself. You might have solved cases going back decades, brought closure to families who've been waiting 25 years for answers." That night, I sat in my apartment with the bonds my grandmother had left me. $50,000, enough for the therapy I'd need, enough to relocate if I wanted, enough to start over, but I didn't want to run. For the first time in my life, I wanted to stay and build something in the ruins of what had been. My phone rang. Curtis from the DMV. "Miss Whitman, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted you to know, we've implemented new training based on your case. Every DMV employee in the state will now receive mandatory domestic violence recognition and response training. We're calling it the Whitman Protocol." The Whitman Protocol, my name attached to something that would help others. My grandmother would have loved that. "Also," Curtis continued, "that car of your grandmother's. It's been fully restored by our seizure department. They had to verify it wasn't purchased with illegal funds. It's clean, and it's beautiful. You can pick it up anytime." After we hung up, I opened my laptop to find hundreds of messages on my blog post. Women sharing their stories, thanking me for showing them it was possible to document, to report, to survive. 3 had already taken their evidence to police. 5 more were gathering courage. One message stood out, from a username J. Walsh Sister. "My sister Jennifer disappeared in 1998. The man in your photos, calling himself Mitchell, that's the last person who saw her. Thank you for giving us hope that we might finally have answers." I wrote back, connecting her with the FBI agent handling the case. Another circle closing, another family getting answers they'd waited decades for. A knock at my door interrupted me. Sarah stood outside with champagne and Thai food. "Thought you could use company and celebration. The news is saying Marcus Hamilton was just charged with 8 federal counts. You did that. Leah, You took down a serial predator with a folder and a post-it note. My grandmother did it, I corrected. I just delivered the message. No, Sarah said firmly. She gathered ammunition, but you pulled the trigger. Own it. You're a hero. Hero? The word felt wrong. Heroes were supposed to be fearless, noble, perfect. I was just tired, damaged, and done being silent. But maybe that's what real heroism looked like. Not the absence of fear, but action despite it. We toasted with champagne and coffee mugs, to Grandmother Rose, to documentation, to systems that worked when given the chance, to all the women who'd suffered in silence and the ones finding their voices, to the truth, messy and painful and liberating. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia from the DMV. Wanted you to know. Made my teenage daughter read your blog. She said if documenting everything could take down a monster like Mitchell, imagine what else we could change. You've inspired a generation. Thank you. I looked around my small apartment, the locks I'd changed, the papers I'd filed, the truth I'd told. 6 months ago. I'd been drowning in silence. Now I was teaching others to swim. I need to forgive myself, I said suddenly to Sarah, for taking so long, for not saving the women before me. You were a child, she reminded me. You saved yourself as soon as you could, and look how many you're saving now. She was right. The ripples were spreading. DMV training programs, FBI investigations, women finding courage in my story. Mitchell, Marcus, would never hurt anyone again. My mother was gone, but finally honest, and I was free. Tomorrow, I'd pick up my grandmother's car. I'd drive it with the windows down, music loud, going wherever I wanted. I'd visit her grave and tell her we'd won, that her documentation had worked, that the boy who'd terrorized her granddaughter was actually a monster who'd terrorized dozens, and now he was in a cage where he belonged. But tonight, I sat with my best friend, eating Thai food and reading messages from women who'd found strength in my story, each one a victory, a validation, a reason to keep fighting. I'm thinking about law school, I said. Becoming a prosecutor, helping other women navigate the system. Sarah raised her mug. To Leah Whitman, Esquire, future protector of the documented truth. We clinked mugs, and I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in years. My name wasn't scratched out or erased. It was on protocols and legal documents, in FBI files and training manuals. It was attached to change, to justice, to hope. Mitchell had tried to make me worthless. My mother had tried to make me silent, but I'd documented everything, and documentation was forever. Just like my grandmother had taught me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Leah's journey. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to tap the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything and helps these important narratives reach those who need to hear them most.